This is Beer in Front, part of the Beer Media Group. Every week I'll talk to people in and around the beer world and get their stories all about beer. That's Beer in Front, and it's coming up now. September is Craft Malt Month. As consumers, most of us when purchasing beer gravitate towards a local brewery. With close to 10,000 breweries in the United States and countless others across the world, most beer lovers don't have to travel far for a solid local craft beer. There are over 70 malt house members of the Craft Maltsters Guild across North America, so most breweries, if they utilize craft malt, could find something close to home. On this episode, I'll talk to Chris Schooley over at Troubadour Maltings in Colorado, and I'll also chat with Shea Guillot from Koval Distillery here in Chicago. Koval uses malt from area farmers in their whiskeys, and I could tell you firsthand, they are excellent. So I wanted to add a different perspective outside of beer to the Craft Malt Month episode. I'm going to have all of that and much more on the Craft Malt episode of Beer in Front. Outside of water, malt is the largest ingredient in beer. For reference, I asked Trevor Rose Hamblin, the co-owner and head brewer at Old Irving Brewing in Chicago, for a ballpark amount of malt used in each batch. Trevor went even further. For Beezer, which is a Great American Beer Festival gold medal winner in the hazy IPA category, Old Irving uses 1,492 pounds of malt for a 15-barrel batch. Beezer is a beer loaded with hop flavor. They only use 59 pounds of hops in the same batch. That's 25 times the amount of malt used in a beer where most drinkers focus on the hops. Malt matters. Beezer is a 6.9% ABV beer. For their Bourbon County brand stout, which clocks in at around 14%, Goose Island uses over 5,000 pounds of malt for a 40-barrel batch. That's about a half a pound of malt used for each pint, if you will, of Bourbon County brand stout. So I just wanted to give people an idea how much malt actually goes into the beer that we're drinking. When a brewery or distillery uses malt from a craft malt house, they're supporting a small independent company that uses grain from local area farmers. This money is not going to shareholders of some multinational company. It's going right back into the local economy. It's buying braces. It's buying kids' sports uniforms. It's going out for dinner. It's grabbing a beer. So buying craft malt really is the circle of life where it keeps this money generating in the local economy. All right, welcome back. As the craft beverage world turns its attention to the annual celebration of Craft Malt Month in September, there's no better time to highlight the people and processes behind one of beer and spirit's essential ingredients, malt. I have the privilege of talking today with Chris Schooley at Troubadour Maltings, a pioneering craft malt house located in Fort Collins, Colorado, to discuss their journey, their role in the craft malt movement, and their vision for the future. Chris, thanks for taking time out today on a Sunday.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dave. This is awesome.
Could you tell folks about Troubadour Maltings, how they got started, and what inspired you to enter the world of craft malting?
I've been in craft beverage for, most of my adult life, really. I spent about 15, 20 years in specialty coffee, as a roaster, importer, mostly. I roasted coffee at Intelligentsia in Chicago and was the green coffee buyer at Metropolis. And throughout all that time was heavily involved in the Roasters Guild and Specialty Coffee Association of America, and just, put a lot of time into learning about supply chains, and agricultural supply chains within craft beverage and how meaningful that is. Like, I've always been kind of a nerd about stuff like that, where things came from, probably some of the most formidable uh, things in my youth were seeing Mr. Rogers go to like the Cradle of Crayon factory, or the trumpet or saxophone factory, and the resonating part of that was not just like, oh, this is how things are made, but that they were making things that make things, you know,
Yeah.
like you use crayons to, have your artistic expression or a saxophone or what have you. But the craft of making that instrument in the first place, really, really stuck with me. And so when I got into the coffee industry, it really just naturally came like, oh, there's a whole pathway to where this comes from. And in specialty coffee, 30 years ago or so, really kind of doubled down their efforts in really securing and better understanding their supply chain, working closer with coffee farmers as well as the beneficios and processing plants at origin. We started to better understand what were the impacts on quality, but also what were the opportunities for differentiation and specialization within there. The more that you know about where things come from and the closer you're working with those suppliers and growers and producers, the more you're able to kind of get into something, more specialized and unique, and kind of discover, things that maybe you didn't see before, kind of break away from the homogenous, you know, generic flavors of things and get into, the world of more exciting exotic flavors. So throughout all of that, doing a lot of that work with the trade association, especially, started doing a lot of tastings around collaborations with brewers and whatnot. Every roaster I knew had made a coffee beer with a brewer. And one of the big things at the time was like, oh, well, they did all this work at the front end of it to pick the coffee that they used and how they were going to use it. And then they make the beer, and then it's just like, oh, here's the coffee porter. Like they didn't say, oh, it's Columbia coffee porter roasted by, Metropolis, or roasted by, Color or something. Like it didn't mention any of the other things. So it was like, oh, there's this missing opportunity there. So we started kind of working more closely with brewers at the time. And in that moment, everybody said, well, the most fun part of it was sitting around and tasting all the beers and tasting all the coffees and figuring out what we were going to do. So we were like, oh, instead of making a finished beer, let's start having events where we just have like 5 coffees and 5 beers and let the people, sell a ticket to that event and let the people come and choose. And then like my friend, Jake Cunningham over at Intelligentsia was instrumental in working with the group at Uppers and Downers, which was a big festival out there in Chicago and whatnot. But all that being said, through this work, it hit me like, oh, well, beer is agricultural product as well. What does that relationship look like with their producers? And started asking my brewer friends, what do your relationships look like with your growers? And, a lot of people were going to hop selection and things like that. But on the malt side of things, on the barley side of things, like it was pretty much just, oh, it comes from, I don't know where it comes from. It comes from Canada, It's like, it's this big kind of monolith, the malting, and started doing research into that too. Because just thinking like, again, going back to putting my roaster brain on, like, oh, I want to talk to somebody who's roasting malts to make dark beers, and started looking around for somebody I could talk to and realized, oh, there's like one company in North America who does that. Otherwise it's mostly imported. So all these things started kind of coming together, kind of showing me that there was opportunity to kind of bring to the craft beer supply chain what was already happening in coffee.
I mean, I love the name Troubadour. What does that name signify for the company?
Well, a troubadour is a musical storyteller. And so kind of like what I'm saying is most of the brewers I was talking to didn't know the story of where their malts came from. So we were like, hey, let's tell this story. There's definitely something to be said here with this and where things come from. And, so that's where the name Troubadour came from. And then with the musical attributes of it, it lent itself to a whole lexicon, that we could tap into for naming our products and just start being more creative with it. Again, like the thing being, here's an industry that was more or less kind of making a, for better or worse, generic product, with pretty generic names for the types of malts they were using. So we were like, hey, here's an opportunity to like tell that story and create characters because this is something that lends character, to your beer or spirits. So
I love the names of the malt, although as an old Chicago Riot Fest punk rocker, maybe a Circle Pit malt for something a little more abrasive down the line.
yeah, well, no, we definitely could do that. We actually just kilned our first batch of a new experimental malt. We're making kind of going the opposite direction of that train of thought, but this one's called Yacht Rock. Actually,
Okay.
it's a hyper pale. A lot of brewers are getting into these like super light, like sub 2 Lovibond pale pilsner malts, and so we did a little bit of research into that. Like a lot of that is a lot of color, on your even your lightest malt is really dictated by your variety of barley and that season and water amount. There's a number of different factors that lead into that, but there's also some levers we can pull in the malt house. That's one of the big advantages of craft malt, is just being able to make things on a smaller scale. Like it turns out if you're making a football field's worth of malts at a time, which is what they're doing with the giant malt houses, you're making 500,000 something, pounds of malt at a time. Like you're basically have to make something with a real narrow spec to line into that. We have 2 5-ton systems, so we're going with 10,000 pounds in each system, and each system is on load cells. We have a number of different controls over temperature and airflow, and we're taking real-time measurements and collecting real-time data on oxygen levels and moisture levels. And so we have a lot of different levers we can pull to just kind of get the most out of any particular barley. So we malt primarily Genie barley variety. We are the first to commercially contract that here in the United States. It's actually a variety of barley that was bred in the UK for distilling, but the spec on it looked like it would perform really well in dry land like we have out here in Colorado. Basic flood irrigation, not a lot under like sprinkler irrigation, but good yielder, low profile, but has a slightly higher protein content, which lends itself to a lot of awesome flavor, but could also lend itself to taking on a lot of color in the process. But there's a lot that we can do in the malt process to just slow things down, develop things a little bit more gently, and then in the kiln, stretch things out a little bit and dry things down slower, so we're not developing that color as much. So yeah, so we made a Yacht Rock malt. Because I was like, what's the palest music I can think of?
Do you have like Kenny Loggins or Michael McDonald, harmonizing in the background when you sip something from Yacht Rock?
You got to have Mike harmonizing in the background, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's the lodestone of all that, right?
Yes. Well, what does Craft Malt Month mean to you and the broader, malting community?
Well, this is the time of the year to really kind of lean into this and promote this and really get people understanding what craft malt really represents, which is, we like to see it as really it being able to empower brewers and distillers and whatnot into not just knowing more about their raw materials and where they come from, but being an active participant in collaboration with the makers. That's the whole thing, is everybody in the supply chain is talking and sharing that we can make new things like Yacht Rock, or like our Super Pevic malt that we made for Cohesion when they opened, which was designed to taste like a lot of the heirloom Czech malts, since they're doing all of Czech style pale lagers there, or Czech style lagers, because we also do some Poetomov and Tomavis over there. But we wanted to design a malt that gave us a lot of distinction around that, and mimic that. But that Eric at Cohesion, Eric Larkin knew that they could come to us and talk with us and work together to create something new. And that's the real promise of craft malt, is that opportunity to make new things, or to just like be more invested in where things come from. In this day and age, when the consumer, there's all this doom and gloom talk about people are drinking less beer and blah, blah, blah. It is harder for the consumer to go out there and spend $8 on a glass of beer, especially if like the brewer can't really speak to what's special about that beer. More that brewer can be like, hey, yeah, we use these exciting hops, but we also use this malt. Like, the more intelligent and informed the brewer can be, or the person serving the beer can be, about all the important things that went into that person's going to feel a lot better about spending $8 for that glass of beer versus going over to the next place and asking, oh, what's special about this beer? And they look back at the board and like, I don't know, it's like 6.5 and that one's 6. Like
Yeah.
it's crucial to differentiate right now and just to be able to like lean into quality and differentiation. It's not just about like flipping a switch and now everything's craft malt, but it's about we offer the opportunity to differentiate that wider supply chain. So with Craft Malt Month, especially this year, I mean, it perfectly lines up with Oktoberfests and whatnot. So we're like, hey, those are multi beers. Fest beers are multi beers. So let's partner with a bunch of our certified craft malt brewer members and make some fest beers to celebrate Oktoberfest and Craft Malt Month all in the same time. So we're partnering with folks like down in Littleton Brewing Company, who's a newer shop here in Colorado, people like Salt Road here in Fort Collins, like all kinds of fun collaborations are going. And that's happening all over the country with craft maltsters and some other brewing and distilling partners as well.
With this Oktoberfest, this fest beer, is it like everyone using the same recipes, or is everybody just kind of doing this on their own? Because I think that would be pretty intriguing. Okay, I'm going to have the same recipe, but using your malt at Troubadour, or maybe have something over from Blue Ox and, do the differences.
Well, definitely as time goes on, that's the thing is kind of locking this in and being like leaning into it, being able to say, hey, Oktoberfest time of year, that's going to be Craft Malt Month. Like as we go forward, we can start to tweak how we're doing it each time. But a lot of folks, traditionally are like, hey, it's fest beer. I'm going to use all German malts and whatnot because I want to make this really authentic German fest beer. But it's also kind of like, well, what they do over there that makes it so special is, they use malts that are from local and that's why when you drink it there, it tastes really special and different, So I think that's kind of what the opportunity is here is like, we're doing traditional styles, but in non-traditional ways per se, just by, a lot of us make malts that are in the same style that you would use for these kind of beers. But I think some people are, doing things a little bit differently here and there. So it'd be really interesting to see how everybody's beers turns out.
Well, for those that are new to the process, I know people that listen to this, a lot of people are just, beer drinkers, some industry people. So for those that are new, can you explain what the difference is between a craft malt house, like Troubadour, and one of your big multi-global players?
I mean, one of the biggest differences, I think there's a number of layers to that question and the answer, of course. It's not just about being local, like I was saying, like having that local definitely is an economic paradigm shift. Here's these small businesses, say here in Northern Colorado, who are buying this raw material from overseas traditionally, right? Like if we're making a German fest beer, we're importing German malt. That's money that business is spending in another country and then bringing that product in and then building that up. Where now here's this small independent business buying the raw materials from another small independent business in the same county. And not just it's from another small independent business, but it's part of this larger agricultural change in the market. Now that's money that's, the business is spending, but then as the people come to drink the beer and buy the beer, they're now feeding into this big, huge loop that's all kind of localized. So when we talk about local and craft, that's the real power of it. But also, I think local is this term that gets way overused and attached to craft because, local is a political boundary in so many ways and also like kind of meaningless and sometimes too. We're up in Northern Colorado. We plant some barley down in San Luis Valley. That's 6 hours away. Well, I could be in Wyoming in 45 minutes. Is that not local to me to use a grain grown over that political boundary? So there's a lot of questions that revolve around that. So what I like to focus in with craft, rather than just using terms like local or even craft for that matter, is really focus on the proper nouns of the whole thing. It's like, because that's the real power of knowing this stuff. It's like, hey, this is barley grown by Greg Walker off of Highway 14 and County Road 3, Genie barley. And Greg harvested it, brought it in. Chris and Steve over at Troubadour malted it, turned it into, Pevic malt, and then sold it over to Tyler at Stodgy Brewing, and they made a fest beer with it. Like everybody in the chain and where it came from and who it came from. That's what craft is really defined by. And by on any stretch. I think this goes back to coffee, it goes back to any kind of craft beverages. Craft is, particular ingredients, particular tools, and then, the skill set, the knowledge, the experience, the training, the stupidity, the daring to do something with those other things that is ultimately a personal expression. Like craft has to have a tasteable, noticeable difference. That's what that personal expression is. So you have to have people in places. You have to have those proper nouns involved in the thing for it to ultimately be craft. Now, I'm not going to sit here and vilify giant, large malting operations because we're not going to be able to support the entire North American barley growing industry as just not even just us, but all of craft malt. We represent a niche within a niche. It's not about saying this is better than that. It's again just creating the opportunity to have some of this incorporated into the larger sense of the word. It's the opportunity to show that this can also have a personal expression. And we have large scale, mass produced commercial malts that we can use for particular things, but I can also buy 1 or 2 bags from Troubadour or a Blue Ox or a Sugar Creek or Valley or Riverbend or any of these other crop maltsters. I can buy 1 or 2 bags and put it into a beer. And because those malts are so character driven, they're going to do something to the beer that I can talk to at the end of the day and say to my customer, hey, this beer is brewed, with some of these other malts, but this malt does this thing to this beer. But being able to point it directly to the qualitative element in that beer back to that raw material is the thing that's going to make it click for people and make it really resonate. And that's, again, kind of getting back to your earlier question, that's a big part of what Craft Malt Month is about, is just taking the opportunity to put the extra effort into sharing with our consumers, with beer lovers, like enthusiastically about why we're so excited about doing it. Because it's not about just shoving information down people's faces. It's about being super stoked and excited about this and being enthusiastic and sharing that enthusiasm so then they can also be enthusiastic about this and start making those connections.
It's almost like everybody wants to go to their farmer's market or their local co-op, but most people, it's just easier to go to your big supermarket. And not that there's anything wrong with the apples at your supermarket. They're perfectly fine apples, but the apples at a farmer's market, kind of along those lines. Yeah, I want to know the farm that this came from. How do we get the consumer to ask those questions? And, you don't want to beat up on the person serving the beer at the bar because they probably don't know, but how do you think we could educate the consumer to start inquiring more about where their ingredients are coming from?
I mean, I think, again, there's a lot of layers to that question. One of them, I think that's part of our intention with giving our malts interesting names, because just like the hop industry, a lot of brewers started putting names of those hops in the name of their beers, right?
Yeah.
So even an untrained drinker who doesn't know a ton about the beer can have this IPA and it smells and tastes differently. They're like, oh, what's this? And the brewer is like, oh, that used Comet, Galaxy, it used something that is evocative and has a cool name to it.
Yeah.
And so the consumer starts to remember, oh, I liked things with that. So that's why we gave the malts those names. So you could say, hey, this was made with Pevic or Ballad or Blue, these names that then the brewery gets excited about attaching to the product at the end of the day as well. I think that's one element of it. I think the other side of it is like some of it happens completely out of our control, which is, when you and I were kids, I'm guessing we're somewhere near the same age or whatever. I'm a kid from the 70s.
Yep.
And when we were teenagers, really the jobs that were available to us were like at fast food places or the dish pit at the pancake house or, things like that. Whereas millennials and Gen Z and whatnot, a lot of their first jobs were at these cafes or even at a Starbucks, where even Starbucks is talking about, hey, this coffee comes from somewhere. There's another name to it, and I think there's a whole generation. That generation, I think, really does think more about where things come from than Gen X did. We're like a lot of us, Gen X was way more attached to nostalgia and kitsch and whatnot, where I think millennials, just through their original work experience, got more exposed to like, oh, this comes from someplace, and I should think about that and be more aware of that. So I think there's some of that that's happening already. What we could do to help, I think, is again just be enthusiastic about it when we use a really cool ingredient. Make sure we're talking about that in the way we share it, because it's all of our jobs in this industry to get people excited about drinking these beers. Like long gone are the days of if you brew it, they all come, right? It happened. I mean, we can't deny it. There was a minute where you could just open
Yeah.
and pour a beer and there's going to be a line that forms. And I think, to much of our benefit, I do think some of that has changed now. And I say it's a benefit because it means the pressure is on us to make sure that we're constantly delivering quality and delivering new experiences, or at least elevated experience on a consistent level.
I mean, talking to other malt companies, in past episodes, the one thing that always struck me was like sustainability, everything like that. So, what innovations or sustainability practices are you most proud of at Troubadour?
I mean, a number of little things for sure. One, how, like I was mentioning before, just closing that loop, no longer, the amount of carbon reduction just in buying malt from down the road versus across the ocean. I mean, I could do the math for you and show you. It's pretty significant. That thing by in and of itself is really huge. One thing that we've done at Troubadour, which seems like maybe a little thing, but is actually a pretty big thing, is definitely before COVID and whatnot, all the breweries were doing a lot more, talking a lot more about recycling their malt packaging, their malt bags. Like a lot of them were pooling together their old malt bags to send them off to be recycled, because the fact of the matter is the recycling of that malt bag material, poly bags, plastic bags, most states don't do that. And pretty much hardly any states actually do that. Most of that poly recycling of that material was happening overseas. So brewers were pooling their bags together and then shipping them. And maybe like we don't even know, right? Like that's the whole
Yeah.
thing. So there's a lot more conversation about this before the pandemic. Obviously, with that came a whole other, new challenges and whatnot that everybody's facing. So I don't blame it for falling off the radar. But we adopted at that same time, we moved into full recyclable, compostable packaging. We're all paper bags here at Troubadour. And really that malt packaging is one of the largest single-use plastics in all of craft beer. So moving into all those to pure paper bags, so it's completely compostable, completely recyclable anywhere in the world, not just overseas, I think is one thing that we kind of focused on to be to kind of really make a difference on that level. But also just working with a number of groups on different grains for sure. Like we worked with a group here in Fort Collins on Kernza, which is a perennial wheatgrass where you plant it once and has a really deep root system, so it uses a lot less water. Uses water more efficiently. It's a no-till. You get 5 different harvests out of it, so you're doing less damage to the soil, which allows just different biomes to like develop in that soil. It's a much healthier soil. So that's one thing. We also work with the Rye Resurgence Project down in southern Colorado on rye, and that's rye down there is a great ground cover crop that actually still has value attached to it in terms of the harvest. Down in southern Colorado, it's much more potatoes. Is what they're doing a lot of down there, but also has been a large producer for coarse barley for a number of years. And we do some barley production down there as well. Having that rye down there, rye is a good rotation cereal that also needs less water and less attention, and is better for the soil and water use as well. But I mean, it's all these things, right, on small scales and little bits and pieces each year, just collecting data from our barley production, collecting data from our wheat production, and figuring out how to do it more efficiently. Being able to look at, we serve both sides of the supply chain. We're trying to really like provide amazing malts for the brewer and distiller, but we're also trying to, find varieties for the producer, for the grower that are going to get good yields, get a good premium price, but also, use less water, be less intensive on the soil, grow really well in these high desert conditions, all those elements as well. And then we're also currently in the process of organic certification. We're going to be doing a lot of contract organic production here and supporting full organic and regenerative organic agriculture here in the state of Colorado.
Well, before we wrap this up, what breweries in Colorado, so the people that are listening in Colorado, where can they stop and get a beer that utilizes Troubadour Maltings?
Well, for sure, up here in Fort Collins, you've got friends like Stodgy and Horse and Dragon. We do a lot with the pilot program, a lot of really fun experiments with Kelly McKnight over at the pilot program at New Belgium, as well as Lauren in the Wood Cellar. Then also like Mythmaker here, we do a lot of really cool smoked beers. Zwei, we do a lot of their specialty dark malts as well as smoked malts. They're a world-renowned German style lager brewery up here in Fort Collins. Down in Denver, you got folks like our mutual friend who we've been working with for years, Cohesion. Eric at Cohesion, like I said, we developed a custom malt with, which he then was like, hey, let's share that with everybody. Littleton is a new shop that we just started doing some really cool work with. New Image, we've always done a lot of really fun things with as well, and Cerebral Brewing. And then also Purpose, actually today up here in Fort Collins, Purpose and Hello Brewing in Fort Collins were the ones that came to us to help us develop this Yacht Rock malt. And Purpose is actually brewing the very, very first beer with it today as we speak. So all kinds of fun up and down the front range. And Primitive Beers, if you can find them anywhere, incredible spontaneous fermentation beers. Brandon and Lisa are amazing people, and we've worked with them since day one. That's all 100% Colorado raw materials in those. And then also in Chicago, we've done some cool things with Hop Butcher in the past,
Okay.
a number of times as well. So, yeah.
Oh, anything coming up? Because I could walk the Hop Butcher. I mean, we used to be neighbors.
The old neighborhood. Yeah, no, I'll hit
Yeah.
them up. We're overdue
Okay.
to get something moving with them again. So,
Yeah, well, I'm sure that I've had it because, like I said, I could walk the Hop Butcher from where I am. So I usually stop over there every couple weeks and see what they have. What did I pick up? I picked up something. It's in my refrigerator right now. I think it's be careful or watch out for foul balls. So,
nice.
but no, definitely. Yeah. Let me know next time you do something with Hop Butcher. I'd love to make sure I taste that and, give you guys a shout out for that.
Absolutely.
Well, Chris, I appreciate it so much. I know it's a Sunday afternoon. You got things to do besides sitting here talking to me, so I do appreciate it. It's Troubadour Maltings. I'll include the link in the show notes. And whatever you do, please support Craft Malt Month. Chris, thank you again, sir. I appreciate it. All right, welcome back. Koval Distillery, located at 4241 North Ravenswood in Chicago, was founded in 2008 and quickly won over the spirits world by producing award-winning whiskeys and gins. In fact, they've taken home over 100 international awards over the years. Everything they release is terrific. And if it wasn't 9 o'clock in the morning as we're recording this, I might be sipping on their barrel gin, but it's 9 a.m., so we're going with coffee. I'm honored to be talking today to Shea Guillot, the marketing coordinator over at Koval.
Oh, yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me on, Dave.
You might have the best job in the world, Shea. How did you get started at Koval?
I worked in photography and video production before this, and Koval wanted someone with a business background, and I studied business in school who could still help with their asset creation. So it was kind of like a best of both worlds job opportunity for me.
Many, when they think of malt or barley in the alcohol world, they think beer, but Koval uses malted barley along with oat, rye, and wheat in the mash bill for the 4-grain single barrel whiskey. How does the malt that you use impact the taste of this?
Yeah, malt will often impart a sort of earthy tone to something. And actually, lots of distillers, especially historically in whiskey, did use malted barley before the World's Fair in Chicago at like the turn of the century, forever ago. In a similar reason, I think. I don't know as much about beer, so maybe you can correct me. That brewers would use it because it helps turn the starches and grains into sugars.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you also have a Thresh and Winnow line that has
Yes.
an 8-year-old American single malt whiskey. Now, I haven't tried this yet, but how is that product?
That one is, especially earthy, very, very unique from us because we tend to have, a very bright flavor profile, not necessarily like other whiskeys because we only use single malt whenever we want to, or use malt whenever we want to. I'm saying single malt because that's a single malt.
Yeah.
So we're very particular.
I mean, that's a really cool line. My wife and I did the tour last week, and we noticed that even like the bottles, I mean, you also have a couple different versions of gin with that line, but the bottles itself are phenomenal.
Yeah, we're really, really proud of those bottles, and they have won, like, they have swept the design awards in whiskey categories and in craft spirits in the past year. We actually, not many people can say this, but we beat Beyonce. Our whiskey bottle beat hers in the Dye Line is like the packaging award, and we came in first for whiskey, and she came in second with her Sir Davis line.
Oh, well, that's
So we're
awesome.
we're yeah, we're very proud.
I know my wife was like, "Can I just buy an empty bottle of it?" I'm like, I might just have to buy a full one and you could use the bottle when I'm done with it.
Best of both worlds.
Yeah. What I love is that Koval sources the entirety of your grains from organic farms right here in the Midwest, close to home. Even the barrels you use are from Minnesota. Why is local so important to Koval?
Oh, because we believe that businesses should exist to support and elevate the community that you're in. So that's just part of our founders' ethos. And we really give into that in every way. Like we source all of our grains from the Midwest, like you said. We only make certified organic and certified kosher products. And we're also very big on like on the other side for charity and supporting initiatives here in Chicago. So just in every single part of what we do, we want to support local farmers. We want to support the community that supported us and allowed us to grow.
If you're in the Chicago area listening, if you haven't done the tour, you definitely need to sign up for that because that's awesome. That's on the weekends over at Ravenswood at 4241. That's like a fantastic time. When we were there, some person was on like his 60th tour. I'm like, all right, my man. Yeah. In
Super
addition,
fan.
yeah, he's a huge fan. In addition to the world-class whiskey, Koval produces a dynamite gin. In fact, my wife and I bought the cranberry gin liqueur, and we included it in our Chicago gift basket to out-of-town guests when we got married. The dry gin also and the barrel gin, both killer as well. What's a bigger seller for Koval, the whiskey or the gin?
Well, our bourbon is definitely our flagship product because it's a little bit unique. It has a mash bill of 51% corn, as all bourbon has to, but the other 49% is actually millet, which is not a common crop you would see in whiskeys. I think that we're the only distillery in the world that uses millet in our bourbon, and we find it kind of softens that ethanol heat. And then besides that, to the point about Midwestern farmers, millet is a regenerative crop. So we're really, really happy to be able to create a demand and a reason for farmers to be growing this crop that's going to leave their soil better than whenever it started.
Yeah.
So bourbon is our number one, but our cranberry gin liqueur is a close second. That's a fan favorite, a cult classic. It's not like a common spirit like you would hear whiskey. I know what that is. You know what I mean? But we're the only people who make that cranberry gin liqueur with Wisconsin cranberries, by the way. And once people try it, they just cannot get enough.
Like initially, I would see it around the holidays, but now I see it year round. So that's more of a year round product now.
We did start it here in the US for the holidays because, cranberries, Thanksgiving, Christmas, that kind of natural association, but just people liked it so much, they wanted it all the time. And we're
Yeah.
people pleasers.
Yeah, exactly. Give the people what they want. Well, here locally in Illinois, you could pick up Koval everywhere. You could go right to the distillery. You could get it at liquor stores, bottle shops, even Target locally carries Koval. Where else in the country can people pick it up at?
I believe that we're available in almost all 50 states.
Okay.
Which we're really, really proud about. So you can find us anywhere. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head every retailer that carries us, but we have a tool on our website where you can look up what area you are in or put in your zip code, and it should tell you the closest shop that carries us. And we also do now offer delivery, so you can order straight to your house if you want to.
Well, that's perfect. So I'll include the link in the show notes. But Shea, I really appreciate taking time out this morning to talk to me. This has been a lot of fun. Hopefully one day down the road, we could do just a solo episode on Koval, because I would love to go back and try it again.
That sounds great.
All right. Take care. We'll talk to you down the road.
Okay, bye, Deuce.
All right, the beer that's in front of me now is a classic. This is Allagash White, Belgian-style wheat beer, 5.2% alcohol. They use craft malt in Allagash White. When I did an episode a year ago, I had this, I wish more breweries would tell you what malt they use, and they don't. So I had to go with what I know here in Allagash White. But it's an excuse to have Allagash White again, so how do you go wrong? So let's crack this one open. Beautiful light color, good foam here, good couple fingers of eggshell white foam. Smells really good. You definitely get the coriander in that. I think it smells really good. That's excellent. You just can't go wrong with that. Such a great beer. Pick it up. I grabbed this in a stovepipe can over at my grocery store. Can't go wrong. You got Allagash White in the stovepipe, put it in the cart. With this, you get all the spices. I think it does take away a little bit from the malt because you have your coriander, you have your orange peel. That's what really hits me up front. So I do wish more breweries would come up with beers using craft malt, or you'd let the malt shine, but I'm still never going to turn down an Allagash White. Excellent. If you see it, you know what to do. Put it in the carts. If you haven't had it in a while, let this be a reminder. Pick up the classic. So grab yourself some Allagash White and buy beers that use craft malt. All right, once again, I want to thank Chris Schooley from Troubadour Maltings and Shea Guillot over at Koval Distillery. Both great companies. I'm more familiar with Koval because they're neighbors, but definitely check out Troubadour Maltings as well. If you'd like to find out more about Craft Malt Month, head over to craftmaltmonth.com. It has a full list of education, tastings, events that are happening this month. So definitely check out craftmaltmonth.com. I know I have some brewery people that listen to this show. I'm thinking, hear me out on this. A nice Vienna lager. You could call it in the cart and you could use malt from a craft maltster. That's a good idea. You could support craft malt, get the word out, and it's a Vienna lager. I would drink it, and all of my friends in this podcasting community, we would support it as well. So think about this, breweries, and who wouldn't want to drink a nice Vienna lager? That's something to think about right there. But no, seriously, check out craftmaltmonth.com. Thanks once again to Chris and to Shea for coming on. I appreciate it. And definitely, you got to go support the craft maltsters out there. All right, that's going to wrap things up for the Craft Malt Month episode of Beer in Front. I thank you very much for listening. Once again, I want to thank Chris Schooley from Troubadour Maltings and Shea Guillot from Koval Distillery here in Chicago for chatting about their great companies. Have a great week, everyone. I'll see you next week. And remember, sometimes the beer in front of you is the best one yet.